Chapter 1. Do You Want to Make a Monster? Siberia, February 1995, 23:41. The sun blasted through the helicopter window, right into Fyodor Molosov's face. Try as he might, he could not shake the blazing light from his sleepy eyes, and found himself sitting up from his seat and peering out the window. They weren't far off. The frosted landscape reflected the infernal sun, sparkling like powdered diamonds as far as his eyes could see, straight to a mysterious crater that housed the secret military science facility, Schwanwich. He stretched in his seat, ruffling his fluffy parka as he moved around, popping his old joints from his uncomfortable sleeping position. They had been flying for over 10 hours from St. Petersburg to Siberia, and soon he would be back to work, creating a brand new biological weapon in the name of Russian diplomacy. Though the Cold War ended between the Soviet Union and the United States recently, the two nations kept a close watch on each other. Molosov wasn't too surprised by the outcome of the meeting he had with President Yeltsin and others. However, he wasn't looking forward to sharing his lab with this newcomer. He looked up from his seat to her seat. Dr. Ekaterina Markov sat reading her book, sheltered from the sun's blinding rays. She was very pretty. Her long legs wrapped in nylons curved over her seat, crossed, her round-toed flat dangling from her suspended foot. A short but tasteful skirt reached just above her knees, while her white parka reached well below her waist. Long blonde hair pulled tight in a bun on the back of her head, and just over her book, he could see her sharp blue eyes moving down the page, scanning the information and logging it into her hippocampus. He was smitten with her, but he also found her peculiar. She was the leading mind in genetics, with many successful experiments under her belt, but with her youthful appearance, she could only be in her late 20s. How on earth could she be a reputable scientist and look like a supermodel? He surmised that she must have been her own test subject at one time. To do what she did with genetics was simply astonishing. Rumor had it that she could change one's entire appearance by changing a single strand of DNA. Hence why President Yeltsin wanted Dr. Markov to work with him, Dr. Molosov, on their latest assignment, spying on the U.S.'s newly formed Bureau of Monster Capture and Rehabilitation. Dr. Molosov admitted that he wasn't familiar with Dr. Markov's work, but he had some experience in genetic experiments. However, most of his projects hadn't gotten past the prototype stage due to their crude designs. They were less than finished, less than human, less than obedient. What would one expect from a monster anyways? He preferred his electronic monstrosities. They were controllable. Flip a switch and they turn off. Just a combination of circuitry and reinforced steel, accepting all commands given to them without a whimper or complaint. When he was commissioned to create human-animal hybrids, he did not blink at the challenge. But his efforts were less than fruitful, and it was in the Soviet Union's best interest to create their own monsters in case of an American attack. So President Yeltsin hired Dr. Markov to design a new weapon, a symbol of the Soviet Union's immeasurable strength that would make the Americans blink. He was still astounded by what he had learned during their meeting in St. Petersburg. Just imagine an army of monsters obeying their enemies' orders. St. Petersburg, February 1995, 0900. More than 15 hours prior, Dr. Molosov sat in a conference room in a building in the middle of St. Petersburg. He didn't really know where he was. He entered one building only to take an elevator to the basement, ride a cart for about 3.5 kilometers till he ended up in another basement with several doors, one of which opened to the conference room. He walked in and was greeted by several SBP, Presidential Secret Service, and President Yeltsin himself. After a salute, he took a seat next to Dr. Markov, who he'd not met by that point, and across from a man with short dark hair and dark eyes. His name was Nikolai Zaitsev, a tall and burly man with a clean-cut beard and a face of cold authority. He had several light scars on his face, rumored to be from an accident in Czechoslovakia in 1968. He was former KGB, now a deep undercover asset for the Foreign Intelligence Service, working for the American Pentagon. President Yeltsin cleared his throat. "Gentlemen and lady," he nodded to Dr. Markov, who put her book down on the conference table. "We all know that the U.S. and the USSR are no longer engaged in the aptly called Cold War. However, the Norwegian rocket incident that occurred last week has me and all of our constituents wondering what is next when it comes to our relationship with the United States. Mr. Zaitsev has brought something to my attention that I found very intriguing. There's a lot of chatter about the existence of creatures, paranormal beings, ghosts, etc. In our past, we have experimented with psychics and ghosts. I want to reactivate those programs immediately, especially if the Americans are advancing in that direction." Dr. Molosov's mouth dropped. Mr. President wanted to do what now? Why? We didn't have a lot of success with those experiments. They were haphazard at best and led to more problems than solutions. A complete waste of time and resources. Don't get me started on the Human Z project. Dr. Molosov hid his agitation as much as he could, but it didn't go unnoticed. "You seem confused, Doctor." President Yeltsin's eyes narrowed and bore into him. It felt as if he could see his insulting thoughts. Dr. Molosov straightened up. "Mr. President, with all due respect, those past projects yielded pitiful results. Indeed, we have reopened the Human Z project, but there are a lot of flaws. I'd say we need more funding and resources, but I have my doubts that anything good will come out of our continued research. As for ghosts and psychics, I'm honestly lost on the subject." "Doctor, in 1990, a terrorist organization nearly toppled the United States. 5 psychics. 2 survived American counterintelligence, according to my sources. 1 is held in a secret holding location at the Pentagon. The other's whereabouts is unknown. She was last seen in Germany by our surveillance teams but disappeared without a trace." "Terrorists, sir?" Dr. Molosov admitted he wasn't up to date on current events. He blushed at the incredulous look that spread across President Yeltsin's face. His research kept him locked away in his lab, and if it wasn't science-specific, he didn't concern himself with it. Besides, if the U.S. was nearly toppled by 5 psychics, maybe Russia was overestimating their, the U.S.'s, place in the world. It was Zaitsev's turn for incredulity. "It made national news. A group called the Psychic Society assassinated several politicians and bankers, wiped out decades of banking data, specifically debt, destroyed news organizations, and sabotaged law enforcement and military efforts. How did you manage to not hear about any of that?" By this point, Dr. Molosov looked like a beat. He spoke softly. "I don't have time for international news." Zaitsev blinked. President Yeltsin cleared his throat and Zaitsev continued. He stood up and pulled out a thick laptop computer from his bag and hooked it up to a projector that sat on the table. He gestured to a guard to turn off the lights and a second to pull down the projector screen at the front of the room. He flipped the projector switch on. The screen lit up with a frightening image of a great ape-looking man, jaws wide open, large, sharp canines glistening in the camera shot. Dr. Molosov fell out of his chair. Was that an ape man? He had not even managed to make an ape boy. Zaitsev smirked as he scrolled through the presentation he created for the meeting. He scrolled to the beginning of the presentation to a picture of a young man, probably in his late 20s, next to a young woman of the same age. "Dr. Molosov," said Zaitsev. "In 1990, a man named James Perry unlocked his psychic potential by using an ayahuasca gas chamber of his own design. He and his followers gassed themselves every day and achieved a level of psychic prowess that we never realized during our original experiments. Through further development, I believe we can recreate those results. Pictured here are James and his twin sister, Jillian Perry." He clicked to the next slide, which showed several subjects, including a full suit of what appeared to be a thin material. "That suit can take a .60 caliber round and bounce it back several feet." Zaitsev scratched his nose. It is as thin as it looks, but it protected the wearer with the use of their aura. American scientists are working on replicating the process, but I'm sure we can do better. I have also acquired schematics for all the technology that the Psychic Society developed. I have a CD copy for you, Doctor. Now I'd like to focus on new business, which is the creation of the BMCR and cryptozoological research. He handed a round case with a compact disc inside to Dr. Molosov, who gingerly received it as if it were the last surviving tome of ancient science. What materials would he find on this disc, besides the stories of a failed psychic terrorist? Monsters like the Ape Man, perhaps? The picture you all saw, Zaitsev scrolled to the Ape Man, was the mythical beast known as Bigfoot or Sasquatch in North America. It's a beast of approximately 2.74 meters tall, a very broad, very hairy hominid creature that can maneuver through dense forests as if it were 1/3 the size. He clicked his mouse to bring up a photo of the creature lifting a military Humvee over its head. As you can see, it has immense strength, disproportionate with its size. There have even been reports of a Sasquatch ripping an armored vehicle to pieces and massacring an entire squad of military personnel without so much as a scratch. You say there have been reports. Does that mean there is more than one of this creature? Asked Dr. Molosov. Yes. Zaitsev clicked to the next image that showed a little clearing with several beds of grass piled close to each other, each round nest with their centers pressed to the ground as if a large animal had laid upon it. This is considered a small camp. There have been larger camps sighted, but the aim is to capture and militarize them. Dr. Molosov's mouth dropped open. They had such beasts described in Siberia, all of which were rumors and stories, none that he took seriously. But here was proof that such a creature existed. What other stories could be proven with just a little more research and funding? Even more, a live specimen could greatly help his research in furthering the Human Z project. Dr. Molosov, said President Yeltsin, have you met Dr. Markov? She comes highly recommended by an acquaintance I have in South America. Her work in genetic manipulation is unmatched. I think she would be a great asset to you in your work, for as long as she is available to us, of course. Dr. Markov nodded. Dr. Molosov, I read a lot of your work on mechanical engineering. I found most to be brilliant. She offered her hand for a handshake. Most? Yes, well, my dear, I have not heard of you or your work, but I'm sure we'll get along just fine. Dr. Molosov, said President Yeltsin, you will address Dr. Markov with the utmost respect when you are around me. Do we have an understanding? Dr. Molosov winced. Yes, Mr. President. Dr. Markov cleared her throat. Thank you, Mr. President. Dr. Molosov, I understand that it is hard to accept the help of someone you have never heard of, but I want to assure you that with my expertise, I can correct your current experiments and fulfill President Yeltsin's wish. All I need is your support. I can't wait to work with you. Correct. This is going to be a catastrophe. Schwanwich, February 1995, 0 hour. The helicopter descended into the crater. It was hard for the naked eye to tell what was inside with all the snow, but as they submerged into the crater, an immense cavern appeared, and hidden inside was a large steel-paneled door. Upon their approach, the door lifted and rolled upward, revealing a hangar of various aerial vehicles. Dr. Molosov marveled at one of his projects as they entered, the reconstruction of an alien saucer. It was recovered in 1969 from the state of Sverdlovsk. He'd been working on it off and on since 1971, but since he was spread so thin, it passed from his hands to another team in Swanwich. He sighed, longing to investigate its beautiful chassis again. He didn't want to work on monsters. He wanted to work on superior aircrafts. The helicopter landed in an empty slot in the hangar, and as the blades slowed, the two doctors exited. Dr. Molosov hurried to a moving walkway just outside the landing zone. Dr. Markov followed closely behind, her flat slapping the concrete with every step. Both were eager to leave the frigid hangar and enter the warm military base. The walkway ended at a sliding reinforced glass door, which opened immediately after they stepped off the walkway. They entered and stepped onto a second moving walkway, passing military personnel and scientists as they went. The hallway was large, with an expanse between both moving walkways on either side. Many stood in the middle, talking and smoking. Soldiers held onto their rifles and laughed at their crass jokes. Dr. Molosov smiled. He wondered if Dr. Markov would be able to handle this surly group of the most qualified that the USSR had to offer. "We're almost there," Dr. Molosov said over his shoulder. "About 300 more meters." They continued down the hallway until they came across a set of reinforced sliding doors. Dr. Molosov pulled out his ID from his parka pocket and scanned it on the mounted card reader. The doors opened. "Only a select group of people have access to this door. We'll create your credentials by the end of the week." They stepped inside the brightly lit room. It was immaculate. Everything was in place, as if no one had ever set foot in the room. There were several workstations of dark countertops, on top of which lay several trays and medical tools, syringes, needles, microscopes, and a variety of other pieces. But Dr. Markov was drawn to a set of 4 cages that lay on the far side of the room. She stepped closer to the cages to see a humanoid creature in each one. They were heavily sedated, each laid propped up in a corner of their cage, quiet, their eyes drifting down and up with every sound their ears picked up. She crouched down and took a closer look at what appeared to be a boy, naked, his body incredibly hairy, approximately 12 years old. His feet were ape-like with long toes that seemed to reach out and try to grab the bars of the cage. She stood up and surveyed the other creatures. One had large pointed ears and long spindly fingers, webbed and clawed. A translucent membrane connected his long pinky finger to his hip on both sides. His hands wrapped around him like a bat. He shook a little when he saw her eyes on him. Next to him was a boy with 4 extra arms growing out of his sides. He had 8 black eyes on his head. She couldn't tell if he was looking at her. He seemed dead. The last was in a water tank, resting at the bottom. Gills on his neck proved that he was still breathing. His muzzle reminiscent of a fish, with long barbell feelers coming off his lips. Its gaping mouth showed off many sharp teeth that gently clasped together with every movement. His arms and legs were short, and they sprawled out on the sandy bottom of his tank. He had a medium-sized fishtail and a large spinal dorsal fin on his back. Each appeared to be in their early teens. "Dr. Molosov," she pulled out her bulky laptop. "How did you come to these results?" He smiled. He interpreted her expression as mortified. This was beyond anything she'd ever seen. Likely she'd turn and run now, and he could get back to more important matters. "I used eggs from female interns sent to me and fertilized them with my own sperm. After a couple of weeks, I introduced different DNA into each one. I think you can guess what kind. This is the result. Not too bad if I say so myself. However, their existence is painful. All have developed some form of mental illness and are unable to socialize with the soldiers here or even with each other. I have had some success with EXP-002R and EXP-001I. The only conclusion I can draw is that their eggs came from the same female. They must have some sort of bond from that." Dr. Markov looked at the cages. Each was labeled as such: EXP-002R, EXP-001I, EXP-003G, and EXP-004L. "What is the naming convention you are using?" "I labeled experiment 001I is the 9th and most advantageous of the 8 boys I created. 1 through 8 were disposed of. Same with the rest." Her eyes widened. "How many female interns did you have?" 10. Every month I took their eggs and assigned them to experiments 1 to 4. 26 eggs per experiment, each labeled A to Z. These 4 creatures here were the most advantageous in each experiment. The rest were unnecessary. Don't worry, each intern received a high recommendation for her involvement in the experiment." Dr. Markov stared at him in disbelief. "Did they help you dispose of the disadvantageous specimens?" Of course. Otherwise, how would the menial work get done? He smiled. She rolled her eyes and cleared her throat. I'll admit, Doctor, that this is far better than I thought you were capable of. You have a basic understanding, a very basic understanding, of what can be accomplished. However, I can make something better. She opened her laptop and turned it on. I can manipulate the human genome flawlessly. I understand the sequences of every species on this planet at a glance. I can fix your 4 experiments here, and together, we can create something truly monstrous that will make President Yeltsin shudder. What do you say? Do you want to make a monster with me?
That was the first chapter of How to Make a Monster, the Slenderfoot story. Narrator Skye helped me make this a couple of years ago. It's on Audible, the full thing. So if you can't wait for installments, go ahead and check me out on Audible and download it. I'd really appreciate it, and it'd help me a lot as a struggling artist. Well, thanks again for listening. Have a wonderful day.